Hello, everyone. My name is John Edwards. With me, as always, is Zeke Baker, and together we make the Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for making us a part of your day. Say hello to the folks, Zeke.
Hello.
That's all you got?
There's a lot going on right now. I'm distracted.
You're very... Well, that's normal. But it's a very special night tonight. We have the whiskey professor himself, Bernie Lubbers, Mr. Bottled and Bond. Thank you very, very much for coming into the studio with us and spending some time.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Zeke. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me down. I love coming to Nashville.
We should have planned it out more because I know you're going to Roberts after this.
Usually.
And I feel like we should be going.
I need a bologna sandwich.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Roberts is my favorite bar in Nashville. And there's no other place you could go and get a nice PBR and listen to some...
Station Inn and Roberts are my two things.
Yep. Mm-hmm. If they ever got rid... They just got rid of Paradise Park. And if they got rid of Roberts, I think... I'm not going to lie. I know I'm a big guy. I'd cry. I would cry.
Yeah, I think the Paradise's final shindig was this past weekend.
On Saturday night, yeah. It was a big to-do.
Yeah, I was invited and I purposely made it so that I couldn't go. I met some friends like, why are you wearing gym clothes? So y'all cannot drag me to the bar.
I don't need squishy feet tonight. I didn't mind it when I was 20, but or in my 20s. We also are very, very lucky to have two other guests. One you know and love, Ryan Yamada, now in Nashville, our favorite Cooper Spirits rep. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me back.
And Vinny, who runs headquarters in down. We are talking about downtown Nashville bars. We have Vinny here as well.
Hello. What's up?
We have a whole group of guys sitting around a table with a bunch of whiskey on it. So, Bernie, I know you brought us some...
Can't come empty-handed, not from Heaven Hill anyway.
No, and
we've got so many brands, I don't even know what they are.
I do.
Well, and I mean, let's before we even go into what you brought, let's kind of... I mean, you guys have everything. You have Elijah Craig, you have the Heaven Hill Select Stock, you have Parker's Heritage, you have Larceny, you have McKenna, you have Elijah Craig. Mm-hmm. What else am I
Then
missing?
we have a bunch of little regional brands like Pikesville, which was now a national brand. We have Rittenhouse Rye. We have Bernheim Wheat Whiskey. We have Old Fitzgerald. Then we have like J.W. Dant, JTS Brown, T.W. Samuels, Heaven Hill Whiskey.
Yep.
Virgin Bourbon for 4 markets out there. I mean, we've got and I'll go into why that happened, but, that we have, and then you go over to Europe and we've got things like Mark Twain and Daniel Stewart and different brands that, you just never ever seen or heard of. So, and of course, our flagship brand is Evan Williams.
Yep. Evan Williams, which is, I think, the highest produced bourbon in the world, right? Or is
that's Jim Beam. Jim Beam's number 1. They're about 7.5 million cases, and we're not going to catch them. We're number 2, though, at 2.5 million.
I knew it was up there.
Yeah, so we're number 2, which means we outsell Maker's Mark and Wild Turkey and Bullet and all that stuff. People are surprised about that, and it's only the salespeople and the owners worry about those kind of numbers. That's our goal is not to be number 1. Thank God, because we're not going to be. Our goal is to be the most admired and recognized distiller of American whiskey. And that's important because, well, first of all, we're family owned. And so the family, they're the ones, they worry about the numbers. They worry about running the business. Heaven Hill makes vodka and rum, a bunch of, we have tequilas, we have a bunch of stuff. But for the distillery, that's the heart and soul of the industry. It's 30% of our revenue. It's a lot more of our profit than 30%, but it's the heart and soul. It's what we started out as. So it would make no sense to make American whiskey when it terms to looking at profit because it costs so much money. But because the family started out making nothing but American whiskey for about 30 years, it's what they love. And so they don't mind spending the extra money. Plus, when you get to a certain point, the returns are greater when you already have the infrastructure in place instead of having to do it. But still, it makes no sense. I mean, to have a product that you have to wait up to 23 years to sell. Yeah, it's so the most admired and recognized. I think we're one of the most admired. We've won a bunch of awards lately, and I always have the line, "Nobody cares about awards till you win them." We've won a bunch lately, but I don't think we're one of the most recognized, and that's partly our fault. Just because we have so many of those brands and some people don't associate it with Heaven Hill. That's okay. That's why I got a job, so that's fine.
I think at least the people that are in the know when it comes to bourbon, the people that are going to follow stuff, the people that are listening to this show know what Heaven Hill is. And I mean, for anybody who's gone up there, it's a beautiful, beautiful distillery in Bardstown. They have one of the best visitor centers out of the whole Bourbon Trail. You think about that bar with the big
getting ready to remodel it.
You're not getting rid of the round bar.
No,
right?
that's the Parker Bean tasting room. No, we're going to extend it all the way to the cistern room. So you know where they fill the barrels on the other side. It's going to, it's been there since 2000. It's been there for like 14, 15 years. So you got to change. I mean, people, you're getting, a lot of people come back and visit. You want to have something new for them. So that's going to be over the next few years. But yeah, it's the heart and soul is going to. It's fine. But you still got to change it.
I think for all of us, Heaven Hill has a very good reputation. There's so many things from Heaven Hill that we like. But before we even get into that, let's talk about you. I mean, you are the whiskey professor. You are
the man with a plan.
I don't know.
You are Mr. Bottled and Bond himself. I mean, what brought you into bourbon and whiskey? What got you to be where you are?
Well, the industry came to me. So in 2005 is when I started.
Because we know you're a man of many talents.
Well, I was telling you the first I did stand-up comedy for 20 years, from 1985 to 2005. For full-time living, I was a stand-up comic and musician, and so but stand-up comedy was my profession. And then at a certain point, you need health insurance. Right? At a certain point in a certain age, you need health. It is America. We don't get health insurance. So, $750 it was a lot of money to pay each month for health insurance. But I had an opportunity because I've been hanging around some folks, and some of them I still work with today at Heaven Hill, but that were working in the industry and said, "Hey, we're going to have we need somebody to go into bars around Kentucky and talk about whiskey." And as a comedian, you can talk to people. So that's a talent and a skill that I had. And I didn't know that much about bourbon. I mean, I knew as much as anybody growing up in Kentucky knew, right? Which is some myths and some wrong truths. What's the untruth? What is the word they use now? False truth, whatever it is. But anyway,
fake news.
Not fake news. Before it was the truth. But anyway,
no, it was an alternative fact.
Alternative fact. I knew some alternative facts. Like all bourbon has to come from Kentucky. And then there was that one that all has to come from Bourbon County, Kentucky. So anyway, there's a bunch of untruth. So. But I can do that, and then I started finding out that people, even in the industry, this is 2005. So I mean, I was working at Jim Beam, and they hired me, and somebody came up to me and they said, they had Absolute Vodka at the time, and they had all this stuff, and he says, "Too bad you're on the whiskey team, and nobody's drinking that," And I'm like, whoa, I'm from Kentucky. We all drink. There's never like a downturn in whiskey in Kentucky, but I know the whole country. It was a very small thing back then. So, I got to be around and I quickly noticed that people even in the company and in the business and in the industry didn't know that much about whiskey. And as a comedian and somebody who worked for themselves, I can exploit this. So, and I'm interested in it. And my father worked at a brewery, and my grandfather, who I never met, was from Germany, and he moved over to Kentucky in the 1890s. And he and 12 other saloon keepers started the Fall City Brewing Company in Louisville, Kentucky in 1905.
Awesome. Really?
Yes. So if you've ever heard of Fall City, there's my dad's ring. That says Fall City Brewing Company, 45 years of service.
That's awesome.
Oh, man. Take a picture of that. You can put it on your site.
That's awesome.
And my dad retired in 1976. So that's his ring from 76. That's when people used to work at places for 45 years. Mm-hmm. And so, my dad used to bring home stuff from the brewery, and I was always interested in kind of, that industry. I never thought I'd be doing it. And then I was invited, because I was a comedian, I was invited to people, come to these tastings and stuff. And that's when I got hired to those events promotions. And then I started learning more. And then Jerry Dalton at the time, who was the master distiller at Jim Beam, he gave me a copy of the Standards of Identity for Distilled Spirits. and said, son, this is where you need to start. You need to learn what these words on labels mean. And nobody was talking about words on labels. And I decided I was going to make it my thing. And that was going to put me on the map because, I'm not a master distiller. I worked with Fred Noe, one of the best people in the world and one of the best families in the world with the Beam family, Booker's son and Jim Beam's great grandson. And Fred, he was so welcoming and just so wonderful. And I said, well, Fred, I can talk to people, but I don't know them. He goes, hey, you can just ask me, And I'm like, what better source? You got somebody like him and then in Jerry Dalton to ask. I've got the two of the top guys in the world. If I don't learn something about bourbon, shame on me. And plus with my heritage and wanting to, and with my dad did and my grandfather did. So that's where the fervor. And then I was, after about a year and a half, I was invited by the brand manager for the small batch, Knob Creek and Basil Hayden and Booker's and Baker's, but Knob Creek especially, which is Fred's baby, really. But Fred's picture went on the side of the Jim Beam bottle at the time. So as the 7th generation distiller. So he was going to be kind of busy on a year-long tour talking about Jim Beam. And they needed somebody at the time. They noticed there was an uptick in the small batch bourbons and stuff. So I was chosen as an ambassador for that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I better really know my stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started writing the book, because Sister Mariama taught me in grade school that if you want to know about a subject, write a book about it. So I didn't write it as an expert. I wrote it to learn. And I did have an insight that a lot of people weren't talking about. And then there's been two, this is the 3rd edition. So there, over the years, I have bottle and bonds become my thing, and nobody was talking about it. And I saw that's something I can hang my hat on. And I told myself one day, I'm going to bring bottle and bond back. Nobody's talking about it. And even people inside the company didn't want to talk about it. And I'm like, this needs to be talked about. And I saw that it resonated with bartenders. I saw that it resonated with people, and no one knew anything about it. And they'd say, bottle and bond. And just what my dad told me. It's the good stuff, son. And I go, what's that mean? He goes, well, it's 100 proof. And that's about as far as he could go. And it says on the bottle, inspected by the United States government. That's back when, people trusted the government. It was a long time ago. But, and that's about as far as anybody could go. And I'm like, if I know words on labels, and bottle and bonds, one of words on labels, that goes right along with it. So that's what I really held my shingle on. And it kind of put not just, me on the map a little bit, but that wasn't the goal. I mean, it's just, you got to be credible in the industry when you're talking to folks. When you're talking to folks like Ryan, when you're talking to folks like Vinny, when you're talking to folks who are behind the bar. I'm not a distiller, nor do I pretend to be. You can ask me about some questions about distillations, and I don't know. But you know what? I got Denny Potter's number in my phone. Who's our master distiller. I got Charlie Downs' number in my phone, who I texted today on the way down here to learn some stuff about pre-fire stuff and that kind of stuff. I've got, Craig I can talk to. Hell, I can talk to Eddie and Bruce and Jimmy. I got a lot of people I can access. And when I go to Whiskey Fest and when I go to different things, if you're not talking to these people, and always have a couple questions for the Jimmy Russells of the world, for the Denny Potters of the world, have a specific question. They'll tell you. I mean, even if you think, he won't tell me that. And I mean, you get a lot of honest answers because they're not in marketing and they're not in sales. They're making the stuff.
Well, and hell, that's why we did a podcast. I mean, I think it's the same reason you wrote a book. We did the podcast because we're not experts. We said we want to explore this a little bit more, and
over time you become an expert. And over time, what they say, 10,000 hours talking about. I don't know what it is, but anyway,
Bruce
over
Lee,
time,
10,000 kicks,
whatever.
Like that, yeah.
But over time you become, and I don't think I'm an expert.
We put in a lot of tasting time.
But I think that's one time. It's like Jimmy probably. Jimmy and Parker. Parker would tell me. Parker Beam. He goes, Bernie, I learn every day. I learn every single. Jimmy says the same thing. I learn every day. I know better certain things. I know better to let a whiskey go this far down. It's going to flock up, but here I'm going to bring it up. 6 months ago, this was not flocked up, and now it's flocked up, and I know better than that.
He's holding an Elijah Craig 18 that is pre-Fire Heaven Hill. That is a perfect example of why you would chill filter a whiskey and what happens to a non-chill filtered whiskey when it gets down to the bottom.
Yeah, if nothing else, this is going to be a good learning point.
And that's a hot button issue is chill filtering.
Always.
You know, it's
If
just
you
fine.
get a message from this podcast tonight, it's drink up.
You're right.
You know, don't
Whiskey
let it
is
go.
made to be drank.
Yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
That's right.
But-
Parker would say, when you open a bottle, finish it.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're with friends. If you're by yourself, you know, another point.
When do you have time then to go play bluegrass?
I've had the honor down here in Nashville when we were for the Louisville Visitors Convention Bureau for the Bourbon Trail. I had the honor of playing with Steve Cooley, who's a Grammy Award-winning banjo player. Played with the Dillards many years ago, and then Michael Cleveland, who's the world's best fiddle player, who's probably down in Nashville tonight. If you're Vince Gill, if you're whoever, and you're cutting an album, he's one of those guys that does it in one take. When you're cutting an album, he's a blind fiddle player from up our way, and I'm just lucky to know him. But I've been able to play with him a few times, and it's just amazing. I mean, He's won International Bluegrass Musicians Association. It's a big convention. 250,000 people come to it in Raleigh. He's been named the best fiddle player of the world 10 times. So I guess he's the best fiddle player in the world.
Seems like it.
But and people don't know who he is, but it's just he's just amazing. And he plays a 5-string fiddle, for God's sakes. But I'm just a little guy in the bourbon business who always wanted to be a bluegrass picker. But I need that check every 2 weeks. I've been a musician and a comedian, and I've got a good gig right now. But I make a point. I played a gig Saturday night with Hickory, and my buddy Hickory Vaught, who's a great mandolin player, an unbelievable vocalist, great guitar player. And he and I together wrote a show that Ryan has seen that we do called Bourbon Through Bluegrass, where we tell the history of how bourbon became bourbon, and we taste unaged corn whiskey and go into aged corn whiskey, then how wheat comes into the equation, and then bottle and bond, and then the small batch and single barrel. So we tasted that evolution, because certainly 200 years ago, Evan Williams and Elijah Craig and Basil Hayden and Jacob Beam were not making bourbon. They were making unaged corn whiskey. It wasn't until the 1800s that the barrel comes in. So we taste that evolution. We see that evolution. We taste it. We feel it. And then we see how wheat comes into it, because wheat wasn't a thought out thing. Wheat was like a winter grain. So if you're going to make beer in the wintertime, corn's gone. So for the most part, so you're going to throw wheat in there. So it wasn't like, hey, we're going to make wheat. It's like, this is what's here. So, you see that evolution. You see how it goes. And then along the way, we play live bluegrass music, either from the time period or about the time period we're talking about. And it's a really cool way to do a tasting that's different, because tastings are tastings.
If you ever have a chance to see that show and walk through the tasting and hear the stories and the history of whiskey, it sticks with you. It's amazing, and you're blessed to experience it.
Well, we're proud of it, so thank you.
I'd be remiss to not bring up the parallels almost between you and Al Young. If you think about...
That's a compliment. Thank you.
Well, I'm just saying, if you think about his history and coming through the theater and just kind of falling into whiskey that way, and you with comedy and music, and falling into bourbon the way you did. Yeah. And both of your biggest strengths are your ability to talk to people and be that face of the brand. To not the face that's out there like the Jimmy Russell or anything like that, but the face that is, the ones that are going to the masses. You are the grassroots campaign. You are the ones that are getting the crowds up and going and being the stewards of your respective distilleries. It's kind of amazing how things like that happen, right?
Yeah, it's fun. And I found that that show was so powerful. There's 150 to 200 bartenders that come into Kentucky twice a year, called Camp Run Amok. And if you're a bartender out there and you want to hone your craft and meet and network with other folks around the country and the world, it's something to look into. But every spring and the fall, they come into Kentucky and immerse themselves. See if I'm saying this right, Ryan. Immerse themselves into Kentucky culture and the distilling culture, and then it's like a retreat almost with whiskey and with like-minded folks. And then you get the opportunity to meet the folks who make it and represent it. And then doing the show, and I'm really proud of it, because it's kind of become one of the favorite things that they tell us that they look forward to every year. And when they do it, we do it in the beginning of the week. It just sets it off real nice. And so I've had to take it, we could request for it. Hey, y'all need to come do this somewhere. And I'm like, well, I can't have the band come with me because they got lives. So I've learned a way to do it in a solo way. And it's a little bit different, but and I show a way of Merle Travis, but the Travis style of picking that I like to do. It's kind of a thumb picking kind of a thing. And it's really, it's unique, and it's unique to Kentucky. But because of Merle Travis, it wasn't started that way, but like many things perfected that way. And then, bluegrass music and Bill Monroe. So even though Nashville and the Ryman take credit for bluegrass, Bill Monroe did come from Kentucky, and it is a Kentucky kind of thing. But without Nashville and WSM, bluegrass wouldn't be introduced to the rest of the country. So I put those things into the tasting when I do it, and it's a lot of fun. And so I'm going to Europe again, and so when I go over to Europe and I do this tasting and I play the music for them, it really brings it alive when you're in the UK, like in Manchester or London. I'm going to Cyprus this year, and I'm going to Italy, and I'm going to Croatia, and it's so much fun because I get to turn them on to Kentucky whiskey and turn them on to Kentucky music.
Now there's plenty of talk about being with the Beam family. So when was the transition to Heaven Hill?
Well, I'm still with the Beam family, because there's Beams over at Heaven Hill too. But that's coming up on 6 years.
Okay.
Opportunities happen, and I built a nice reputation for myself. And they needed somebody over at Heaven Hill. The gentleman that was doing it before, Rob, he transitioned into another position at Heaven Hill. The traveling was a little bit heavy for a guy who had kids at home and little kids at home and stuff, because I travel 3 weeks a month. So he actually now represents for our sales Kentucky and Tennessee, which is really cool. So he has roots down here too and comes down here. But there's the company side of things too, and so there's certain things that changed in the company, and I was moved around in a position that I wasn't really having fun in, but I was still expected to be an ambassador too. So I was kind of overworked, underpaid, and I felt underappreciated. But, the hardest thing was telling Fred no, that I was leaving. And he said, "Do what you got to do, brother." And he goes, "You're always welcome at my house, and you're always a friend." So, it's that kind of thing with the distilling families that are like that. But I've had a blast. Come over to Heaven Hill. It's just been like, you can see. Our whiskey brand manager is going to be mad that I'm bringing this up, but the Mellow Corn, it's a 5,000 case worldwide brand, right? It's a very small little brand, but it's just a cool little brand. No other distillery is going to make this whiskey. No other major distiller makes aged corn whiskey.
Yep. And it's a great price.
It's so cool, and it's so historic, and it's like, wow. They can't even believe, if you like what Balcones does, and I do, they're making corn whiskey. Mm-hmm. And no other major distillery is making an aged corn, much less a bottle and bond straight corn whiskey. So it's so cool to have that and to play with things like that. Bottle and bonds.
Bartenders and industry folks latch onto this.
Yeah, why
see
not?
It, they get excited about it, and I think it's the rarity, but I think it's the quality of it. It's the label. It's everything about Mellow Corn. So to have a product like that gets people excited, that just opens the door for the rest of this.
I really like cooking with Mellow Corn.
No?
It's not gonna lie. There's that, and Evan Williams Green Label is a really good cooking.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. So having those kind of whiskeys coming over to Heaven Hill, then we make 10 bottle and bonds, for God's sakes. 10. So I was talking with John from Smooth Ambler and Old Scout, talking with Rob and Jesse from Strand of Hands and all that stuff. Like I said, I always have a list of questions that when I see distillers and folks that I really get along with too, and they're just fun to be around, and all those. There's very few distillers. They're all awesome. So, and I said, how many brands do you think that are out there in the universe? American whiskeys. And they go, well, there's 1,400 craft distillers in the United States now. 1,400. So if they make one or two, right, we make like 30. Right? And then when there's 10 major distillers, so we think there's over 4,000 brands. A lot of them are a little regional and so don't even leave a city, but still, think about how many Corsair has, right? Think about, so there's probably 4,000.
There's got to be more.
There's probably more.
I was thinking more, too.
But I'm trying to make it realistic too. As you say 5,000, they're going to say, you're crazy. But what over 4,000? How many bottle and bonds are there?
It's under 30.
Right. I was going to say 30 was my guess. Was
It's
30.
under 30, and I mean,
There's probably 20 to 25, and there could be one coming out tomorrow, but there's only going to be like 10 bottles of it, right?
Yeah.
So of the 25 to 30, Heaven Hill makes 10. Crazy. So I took that as this is an opportunity to show what a family-owned distillery can do, because we're the ones to hold the history on brands like Mellow Corn and J.W. Dan and Old Fitzgerald and Pikesville, right? And Rittenhouse Rye. It would make more sense for Rittenhouse Rye to be Evan Williams Rye if you're really pushing a brand. It would make more sense to have Pikesville Rye be Elijah Craig Rye. But our owners love those old brands and really have an affinity to it, because that's one way our distillery was built, was procuring those local regional brands, just like craft distillers do. But we just bought the brands because in the 60s and 70s, when most American whiskey companies that only made American whiskey were going out of business because the business had taken such a big downturn, we had diversified into other spirits, and we became the purchasers of brands. And that's why when you buy a J.W. Dant or an Old Fitzgerald or a Rittenhouse Rye, it has a following. It has a loyal following. And as long as you don't screw it up, it's going to sell that much and maybe a little bit more. And you don't have to advertise it with 1 penny. So it's all revenue, right?
Yeah.
And so you might have the same whiskey sold under 10 different brands. But that's the way our family built this company. And now the challenge is to take those little regional brands. And unfortunately, some of them have to go away. They've done their job. But we need to push. We are in the bourbon business, not the bourbon charity. We need to push Evan Williams, Elijah Craig, and Larceny. Though we do have to make money. And a lot of purists, they'll go, why do you make those honey and the cherry, that Evan Williams cherry and that eggnog? What is that all about? And I'm like, we're in the bourbon business.
Not making it for fun.
Not the bourbon charity.
Making some money.
I mean, that is consumer driven. The consumers want that. Mm-hmm. And if the sales of that honey and eggnog build one rick house, which costs $5.5 million right now, is that okay with you? Can we do that?
Somebody's buying it somewhere.
Is that okay? It's like, would you have to get your permission to do this? So they don't think all those companies went out of business that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. It already happened once. And by the way, companies like Jim Beam had to sell, and Maker's Mark had to sell. Maker's Mark sold in 1981 to Hiram Walker in Canada when it was losing money. Let that sink in for a second. Right?
Seriously.
Pappy Van Winkle's company, Stitzel Weller, which everybody thinks is the right of anything that came from anything, it sold in 1971. And it totally went out of business in the early 90s. I don't consider it the holy grail of whiskey, because if it was a holy grail whiskey, it'd be open, right? And it'd be making great whiskey. But it's closed.
What I would argue, and this is the one thing that's interesting about whiskey, is you take something that is, 15 years old, or you take something that's not even 9 years. When you're distilling that, you have no idea. Your first batch is going to come out 10 years later. Mm-hmm. So you're distilling this stuff. You have no idea if it's even going to be good. Yeah, I mean, you have an idea because you're tasting it along the way. But you're making a big gamble that...
And they're time bombs.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to find out tonight. We're going to taste one that's too old.
Which is one of my favorite parts of Heaven Hill.
They're time bombs.
I'm really surprised John didn't have kind of a bit of a permagrin here. He's referenced that Parker's more than once, and references bottled and bond all the time.
We want to get into the Parkers? You want to talk about the Parker?
Well, you know what I think we got to
go back and forth.
I did bring
he loves the bottled and bond. I'm like, John, you keep beating this bottled and bond. What Where does this keep coming from?
Well, not only is it unique, though, let's be honest, it's a great selling proposition too. Though, there's not a lot of bottom in the market, like you touched on.
Yeah. I call them the Green Beret of whiskey.
It's awesome.
They're the Green Beret. They're the Navy SEAL.
This was one of my favorite things about and we'll talk about this and we'll drink it here probably in our second half. We're going to split this up into two parts, but it's a 30-year bourbon, and Parker used to just. I don't want to tell the story.
Please do.
No,
Parker was an unbelievable gentleman to meet, and I'm so blessed and honored to have been able to work with him. And he's a Bernie. You text me anytime, call me anytime you need anything. Don't hesitate. And what a great resource. He was with our company for 56 years.
He is one of my favorite people in the history of bourbon, I think. And you think about the people that are up on the Pantheon, and you have Parker, you have Jimmy, you have Eddie, you have Booker, all the people that we put up on a pedestal and say are the bourbon celebrities. But Parker was unique because he just nosed everything. Mm-hmm. And this bad whiskey that you brought, that is one of my favorite parts of the Heaven Hill tour. It's Parker just would nose it, and the nose on this, if you open up this bottle and you smell this, I'm telling you guys, it smells amazing, and then you take a sip of it and you're like, this shit is awful.
Undrinkable. So where this came from was, why would we do this? And I wasn't with the company at the time, but Parker told me, and Larry Cass and other people who ran the tasting. So this was the second release of Parker's. The second release was the 27-year-old. Mm-hmm. Everybody at the time said that's way too old. These are people, Booker said anything over 9 years old was too old, and Jimmy's of the camp that anything 10 years old or older is a little too old, or over 10 years old is a little too old. And that's all their opinions, and they're right.
And
for
what year
they
was this
want.
released, just for reference?
What's that?
What year would that have been released, just for reference? The 27.
Well, the 27 was. See, that was how many releases are we on? 13 now or 12? I don't know. What is it? How many Parkers we got?
It was last year was 11, so this is
12. Yeah, 12. That's what I thought. So so that's 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So 10 years ago. So what we did was we brought, because over time, Heaven Hill is one of the first companies to release big older whiskeys. Okay. So on purpose. So Elijah Craig, when it was 12 years old, was released in 1986. It was $9.99 a bottle and sat on the shelves and got dusted.
Must be nice.
Because people didn't trust older whiskeys. If you remember at the time, older whiskeys were put into collectible decanters. And the ages were masks. They would put on there the age in months. So it'd say this whiskey is 120 months old because they didn't want you to think it was 8 years old, or is that 10? I don't know. I can't do the math. I'm from Kentucky. Right? So, 120 months doesn't sound like it's 10 years old. Mm-hmm. But it is. But they would put those on. So I.W. Harper and Heaven Hill and Beam, Jim Beam, they had the most prolific decanter program. They had trains and cars and telephones and all kinds of stuff, different shapes and sizes. So that's where you put your old whiskey, because people wouldn't buy. My dad, who lived to be 94, he was a big bourbon drinker. He drank beer.
That's why he lived to be 94.
One beer at 3:00, and then he drank beer. But he said, I don't trust a bourbon over 6 years old. And I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, if it's over 6 years old, that's just the stuff they can't sell. Right? And he had a point, because they would put it in decanters, and people weren't buying it for the old whiskey. They were buying it for the decanter. There you go. And it would say, what does that say on there?
It's a Beam 100-month-old.
100 months old. Right? So if it was over 6 years old, that's about the upper end of the stuff. Now, Pappy Van Winkle was coming out with some of the yearly release, I do believe, for Old Fitzgerald was the 1849. Mm-hmm. And that was like our Parker's or a birthday bourbon. That was a yearly release, and people got excited about it. And they had a very, very old special, very special old. So that was, that line. But most everything else was in a decanter.
I have the 12. I have the very, very old 12. And I've had the 1849.
Yeah.
Both are great.
Yeah. But that was a different thing. Everybody else, and how else do you think Julian Van Winkle was able to walk up to a distillery and say, do you have any 20-year-old barrels I can buy? I'll buy them all. And they said, sure. Some idiot wants to buy 20-year-old barrels, I mean, that wouldn't happen today. But that wasn't happening in the 80s and 90s,
Well,
so
even the 2000, I mean, even if you think of when I was at Kentucky, and I tell this story all the time. This is another one that Zeke's heard me say too much, but I could go into the Kroger, and you could get Elmer T. Lee, and you could get you could get Tornado Survivor, E.H. Taylor. You could.
Well, by the way, every one of Heaven Hill's barrels is a Tornado Survivor. all 1.42 million barrels have survived a tornado.
I mean,
and the 5 guys sitting here
and floods. We've survived floods,
and
too.
they don't cost you
locusts.
$1,000.
We've survived locusts. Yeah, we should put that on there.
Cicadas.
But it's part of that though. Not so much that you couldn't sell it.
That's a joke, Harlan. That's a joke. Sorry.
The amount they were producing versus the amount being bought, it just wasn't going out the door.
So you know where a lot of it went.
Whiskey.
So it went into canters. You know where the other ones went?
Overseas,
went to Japan. Yeah, went to Japan. Went to Korea. Went to a lot of places because they wanted old. They want old and strong. Nobody here. When my dad said it's the stuff they can't sell. So my dad, like 6-year-old, he bought the Heaven Hill Green Label 6-year-old 90 proof. Not the Heaven Way, but the Heaven Hill 6-year-old 90 proof. $5 a fifth. That's what he bought. That's what he drank it till the day he died. And that's what most people's mindset was. Old whiskey's bad. So that's why so think about this. So Heaven Hill is one of the, and then in the early 90s, we came out with the 18-year-old, $42 a bottle.
how much do you think
that started doing okay because Scotch whiskeys were starting to, hitting the single malts and people were looking at it, so that didn't scare them as much. A new set of drinkers came in, but it still took, years and years.
Well, and I was going to bring that up, and I'm glad you did. How much do you think that is the different mindset of Americans where, because of the weather in Scotland, you're going to need to age that a little bit longer than you would a whiskey?
It took a lot of education. It took a lot of whiskey fests. It took a lot of whiskey lives. It took a lot of, specialized liquor store owners to take an interest in it. It took a lot of things. It's never one thing. It's never one brick, right? It's always a foundation. And so it took Julian Van Winkle and Heaven Hill. But Heaven Hill, Max Shapira, our owner and president, 1986, along with Parker Beam, comes out with, on purpose, 12-year-old 94 proof Elijah Craig. And it wasn't, Julian, we had 18-year-old way before they were coming out with, the Pappy Van Winkles of the time. And then how many people have 20-year-old whiskey now? Hardly anybody, right? So, you had to be around a while.
And
so
if
it's Diageo, us, and Buffalo Trace, right? That's pretty much it. But, we're the only ones that did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Well, and you had to sit on it appropriately and put it in a spot to where it didn't just turn to
funk. Parker was one of the first master distillers to have the mindset, we're going for old whiskey. Then you have to take 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 years to learn where that whiskey tastes the best from. So we learned over time, and Parker wrote down and told Mike Sani from our company, who puts together our, and Chris Briney and the different folks. These are the unheralded heroes of any distillery that you have. The people that tastes, the people who are on tasting panels, the people that put together small batches. You think the distiller does everything? Denny Potter, our master distiller, he'll tell you he doesn't. He can't, right? Yeah. Because you have to have your generals. You can be, the guy on top, but you have to have your 5-star generals out there doing stuff, and they all and you're in the panels too, but you can't do everything. So you have to have people like Mike Sani and Chris Briney, and you have to have those people at like Tommy Kroom over at Jim Beam when he was at Jim Beam, and you have to have those people who have that, and the warehousemen and women who work in there, who work with barrels every day around some of these tasting panels. And then you learn. So we bring all of anything that's under 15 years old comes, that's we call a premium product. That's not by taste, right? That's by price point. Mm-hmm. Small batch, single barrels. Okay. Things are, for us, that's $30, right? So That's going to come from floor 4, 5, 6, and 7, where you get more of the concentrated flavors. Then you've got anything that's like our 18 or 23, anything that's got a lot of age on it's going to come from floor 1 and 2. Now that just didn't happen from the get-go. They had to take 10, 20 years to learn that. When we remember that Rittenhouse 21, 23, and 25-year-old, how do you think people say, you're going to come out with those again? No. Right? Because we didn't know he had it in the first place. They found 200 barrels on the first floor of rye whiskey. Well, rye whiskey, our Rittenhouse rye, is another one of those that sits on the 4th floor and higher. That's the standard. So when they found 200 barrels on the first floor, this is before we started barcoding them, right? This is when Mr. Ice, who did the warehousing, he had a big thing on a piece of paper, on a spreadsheet, and he knew where all the barrels were. But, you lose. And people say, oh, you don't lose. That's bullshit. No, you can lose a couple hundred barrels out of 1,000,000, right? So they found these, and then they go, what do we do with this? Well, first of all, rye whiskey is not supposed to be on the first floor. Well, it wasn't the standard 20 years ago. It's the standard now. So that's how standards are written, and that's how things happen. So when somebody says a new distillery just opened, right, and they're making great whiskey, boy, the White Dog tastes great. Well, that's great. It should. First of all, it should, right? Sure. It should. Hey, their 2-year-old's real good. Good. That's good. That's a good sign, right? Hey, I tasted it last year. It's 3 years old now. It's really getting somewhere. Well, that's great. You know what? I'll check back with them in 30 years because they're going to learn. It's going to change, right? And it might be phenomenal. Denny Potter always describes Heaven Hill this way, and I love it because on December 13th, 1935, we were a craft distiller when we opened up. Right? We just opened. We're making a few barrels a day, right? And all Heaven Hill is today is a craft distillery that became successful. So that's what we are. We're still a craft distillery. We're still making whiskey the same exact way that Joe Beam and Harry Beam were making in 1935, and then Earl Beam was making in 1945, and Parker after him, Craig, and now Denny. Making it the same way.
Do you think there's a difference? So you're talking about those people that have the 2-3 year whiskey, those crafts. I mean, the established brands, I think the big brands that are backed, the Beams, the Heaven Hills.
There's only 10 of us.
Yeah. They have the luxury of waiting.
Sure.
For that whiskey to mature.
Absolutely.
And then you get those crafts that are out that might have a 2-year whiskey that, hey, this tastes pretty good. Okay, that's great. Let's get it out in the store.
I find, and I don't know all of them, but I know the ones that I like. The guys at Corsair, I think they do a wonderful job. The folks that I know what Chip did at Balcones and what they still are doing at Balcones, and what other people are doing, at small little places. They're not trying to compete with the Heaven Hills and the Beams of the world. They're going for other recipes. They're going for other things because it's hard to compete with us.
I mean, as a salesman, I don't want to butt in, but as a salesman, you weren't with Heaven Hill. You're on your own. Let's say you're starting with a company. You're a free agent, Wouldn't you go for the same thing if you weren't with a major market or house or brand? Like, let's be different. Let's be different.
You have to be different.
Let's if we're going to sell, how can we compete with the big guys with the money and the advertising? Let's do our own thing and do it. If you were in their shoes,
Well, I mean, I think that's the ones I see that I think are going to be around a while.
Sure.
The ones that are doing something different. Because if you're trying to make good 12-year-old whiskey, sorry.
Sure.
Plus, you don't have 57,000 barrels in your inventory.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's what a rick house holds right now. So plus you got to have the number of Don Blinko over at Busick. So if you want a rick house built, there's only one company that builds them. Okay. There's only
sounds
one.
like the company I want to get into. So a monopoly right there.
They're the company.
Okay,
right?
Zeke, I'm thinking about starting a company.
Learn something new every day. Yeah, wow.
You're still investing in bars that nobody uses anymore. Put them all over.
And any company can build them. You don't have to use them. But they can build one in 6 months. Okay? and they already have the plans because they've been building them for a while. Imagine drawing up the plans for a rick house. You know, every barrel sits on a rick, and there's thousands of ricks in a barrel house. So, you know, and then oh shoot, we built them and we forgot to put walkways in between all of them. Oh shoot, we forgot that. You know, so you know, you want to call them, right? You want to call them. So first of all, you got to call them. But you know, if you don't have 57, if you only have 5,000 barrels in your inventory, you don't need them. So where are you putting them? You're putting them in a regular garage or a warehouse
or a barn,
which is not going to age the same. Then let's say that company becomes successful, which is what you want. Then they buy one. Well, that whiskey's going to taste different than that. So this is going to take another 10 or 12 or 20 years. So you're talking about now, I'm not saying don't buy things from a craft distiller. I'm just showing you the challenges of the industry that is prohibited. That's why you find that there's going to be 10 major distillers that are going to make 95% of the world's bourbon and American whiskey forever.
For the sake of consistency, when you're talking about these craft distilleries, they don't have the luxury of happy accidents,
right?
That you may have,
right?
That you can release as these limited releases, as the 200 barrels of Rittenhouse that were found on the bottom shelf that shouldn't have been there. That's a happy
which
accident.
We had to ship to a New York or something because nobody was buying it because it was $129 a bottle, and it was 21-year-old rye whiskey that nobody knew what to do with. So we shipped it all up north somewhere and they sold it.
And now everybody wants it.
Exactly. You know, but with the luxury.
But why though? Because of the age statement or because of the liquid?
No one trusted older whiskey back then. I mean, it wasn't a thing, and it was untrusted. It was untested.
But if you think about, I mean, the stuff that you guys probably sell more than anything, and that's the Evan Williams. And the things that people talk about, the the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond is one of the best purchases that you'll ever have in whiskey for $16. You have a great bottle at 6 years old.
But it's only in...
It's only
a very
Kentucky.
small market, and you know that's the thing. It's just like Old Fitzgerald.
You touched on that before we started the podcast.
Yeah, it's like Old Fitzgerald. You know, when we have made that a national product now, but it's not the $20 that it was anymore because you know shipping it out to California is a little bit different than shipping it down the street. And then you have to people don't realize what it takes to have a proprietary bottle. So just the business of creating a bottle. So you're working with it now. Our owner and president, Max Shapira, he designed the original Elijah Craig wide mouth bottle, and he loves that bottle. And I admire him so much because he's this was '86, but he designed that label and he designed that bottle. If you ask a president of a distillery to make a bottle and a label, he's going to send it to an agency. Max made that. That's how hands-on he was. At the time, he probably was the brand manager for whiskeys because, he
wear many hats.
Because it's a family-owned company. You do what you got to do. But still, a bottle, just a small little, like this Old Fitzgerald bottle, which is just a tall round, which is the same thing like a J.W. Dant comes in. Or a Rittenhouse rye. It's just a tall round. The Fighting Cock is also in this bottle. So it can be many different things. So that's something we have. So that doesn't cost anything extra to make that. But if you're going to make a bottle like the new Elijah Craig, there might be $250,000 put into that. Just the bottle. Designing it, making the mold, because you have to have a proprietary thing. And there's a mold. You have to deal with there's only 3 glass companies in the world or whatever. So it's like, you got to deal with that. So that could be $250,000. So you're not going to put something. That's why we took such care to put the new Old Fitzgerald into this beautiful decanter because it heralds back to that brand and to the days. And that's an actual bottle. I'll tell you the funny story when we taste that in another segment. But that bottle probably costs $30 in glass for us, but we probably put $250,000 into that.
It's crazy.
I don't think people think about that. It's like I'm on the bar side right now. On the retail side, you buy, and when you come into, and John worked as a bouncer in bars forever.
I was a bartender too. Right?
Sure. When it comes to purchasing, right, and you go to a bar, you're always gonna pay more than when you go to a bar and you're sitting at home. Everyone knows that. But on the selling side, on the on the distributor and retail and everything like that, what actually goes into producing a bottle, liquid not included, with the manpower, the brand, the billing.
We haven't even talked about a label
the
yet.
advertising and the glass. In the glass, it's like before you even get the liquid in the bottle, you're already at a margin, so you got to go up. And again, like we talked about in the very beginning, you said is we're making money. We have to make some money to keep the business afloat. Obviously, everyone knows that. But we're talking about old fits, and we'll get to tasting. Not only is it a beautiful decanter, it's just like, all right, you got the label, you got XXXX. You know what I mean? It's just people think, all right, price, liquid. There's so much that goes into a price of whiskey outside of the liquid, and it's got to taste good, obviously. There's a lot of variables and factors that go into pricing, which I don't think people realize. Not the general consumer.
And there's certain people that just make a beautiful bottle, and the liquid is inferior, and they put $80 on it, and it'll sell because it tastes okay, and it's a pretty bottle.
Yeah, hype.
There's something we were talking about that I'd love to kind of go back to because we've kind of touched on it a couple times here on air, and then we also touched on it kind of when we were tasting the beginning. But I was mentioning kind of the happy accidents and kind of the learning process, the mad science behind all of it. And I know Zeke was talking about this, and we very briefly mentioned that bottle at the end. And I want to touch more about that, the pre-fire bottle. I'd like, if you guys are open to it, getting back into a little bit about that. Kind of like
I think Zeke would love to talk about that and has been waiting to bring that up. So Zeke, you
Well, I think it's two segments, so I'll let Ryan continue on because I think where he is more with the filtration, this being chill filtered, and then also it still is. I mentioned the oils and the compounds building and
there is science in a lot of this stuff.
And so, granted, nobody can see this right now, but I mean, looking at it.
It's like
This is
if that was a full bottle that looked like that, you would not
melted
purchase
old
it.
fashioned, some sweet tea maybe.
It looks like an Arnold Palmer.
looks like a river.
There you go. Yeah,
I'll be honest.
That's what it looks like.
It looks like a river, for better or worse. I mean,
So that's called flocking.
Yeah.
And that means that the fatty molecules in there are presenting themselves. There's too much air that has gotten to it because that's a cork closure, which is not a airtight closure. And I had let if the bottle was half full, it'd be no problem whatsoever.
Sure,
but it's down to about a half an inch, and it turned on me just recently because people come over to my house and they want to taste some stuff, and I was, you taste anything you want. So, we tasted this not long ago, but it can turn in an hour on stuff, and that's why we cold chill filter. So a lot, it's a hot button issue. People say, don't cold chill filter anything. Well, you're not in the bourbon business, because if every bottle was not cold chill filtered, and then it was put on a truck in the wintertime and got cold, it would look like every full bottle would look like that.
But it's almost like an unfiltered IPA. Very cloudy, very hazy. That caramel color brown.
Yeah.
But it just looks hazy. Unfiltered, like proteins got in there, and
now the machines that do the chill filtering, that's about that costs about a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
And then there's filters that it goes through because they're collecting the fatty molecules, so they're going through. They cost thousands of dollars each, and they don't last that long. So, trust me, if it did not enhance the product, we would not do it because it's very expensive.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you don't do it on every product. We don't do it on anything that's, we used to not do it on bottle and bonds, but we found when we were sending those internationally because they were going so far in containers, they were flocking up. So now it's like 110. I don't know the exact. I can find out, but it's it's north of 100.
Wow, that's interesting.
So anything that we have that's barrel proof, or anything that's like a Pikesville, which is 110 proof, we don't chill filter. But anything less than that, we do, for the most part.
I love Pikesville.
Yeah, Pikesville's amazing. It's amazing.
I think,
but we haven't spent a penny on it, so it's kind of on us. But it wins best rye, it wins best whiskey, number 2 whiskey of the world from Jim Murray a couple years ago. And that's amazing. 6-year-old 110 proof, rye. But, this cold chill filtering, such a hot button issue for no reason. I have talked to people at several different distilleries in the processing, and that's where you find your answers. People who are behind the scenes doing it from many different distilleries that do it. And they assure me, they say that they think, this is their opinion, okay, opinions, everybody's got one, is that it doesn't affect the flavor. Now, everybody will tell you it affects the flavor. You can debate that all day long. So, okay. But what they will tell you is that it affects the mouthfeel, which makes sense to me. Okay. So it's a tactile thing, not a flavor thing. It probably will take a little flavor out, but at that point, can you specifically point that out? One guy maybe can, in the world, So can you? I mean, I don't know, but that's what So we wouldn't do it if it didn't enhance the product. It costs a lot of money. We talk about it a lot, but are you going to buy that product that's $15 to $30 to $60 if it's cloudy?
I just want to say real quick.
Yeah.
For all the people listening that are complaining about pricing, and Bernie's sitting here talking about how much it costs to chill filter and all that other, if we just all agreed to open bottles with friends and drink them quickly, then we could.
There would be no secondary market. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do my part. There's just a little bit of this whole thing.
Yeah. We could keep the cost down with the distilleries because they're not spending money on the filtration. I mean, it's a cyclical thing here. Right. We could all do our part.
Right. That's not that's not a sexy thing to talk about.
It's not, and it's
processing is not sexy.
We were talking about that earlier.
But it's got to be something on and not to put anyone on the spot or anything, but the distilleries have to know that it exists. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, everybody knows.
It's like sports gambling before sports gambling just got legal.
What I have an issue with is people who know nothing that have an objection to it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Or who know one little thing, and it's hard to get into a discussion with somebody when they just say, "Don't ever chill filter," and that's all they got.
I mean, you're right. It's such a buzzword now. I'm seeing all these store picks that people are talking about.
Tell me 3 reasons why they can't get there.
Filtered. Oh no, there's a new bottle out that specifically has an extra sticker, non-chill filtered for extra flavor.
We put some of them. We do that on some of ours because it's such a big point.
But what's the proof again? The chill filtration.
We do north of 100 because we do send things internationally. And if you're not sending things internationally, you can do a little bit lower proof and get away with it. Mm-hmm. But it also depends on where you're shipping it to. We ship to every state. So that just if you're only shipping to a couple states, you don't have to worry about it as much.
They just based alcohol content kind of preservative wise, or
I don't know the science. That's
I feel like that's probably a number that's science related.
There is a total number. You should really have some people on from processing from some time. Because it's fascinating. That's where I learn all my stuff. If I want to learn about warehousing, I talk to warehouse people. If I want to learn about processing, I talk to processing people. I try to go out of my way to get to know folks in the distilleries. And they're, been there 20, 30 years. Let me tell you, they'll tell you an earful.
Oh, we'd love to hear it. But Zeke, I think it's like Guinness. Like the further you go from Dublin, the different Guinness tastes.
I don't know about that. It's more the temperature.
What is a temperature thing? For sure.
But laughably, some months ago, John and I were playing around and we wanted to see if something was chill filtered, so we put that in a different bottle in the freezer. Because in the freezer, it's supposed to do the same thing, get real cloudy, etc. Well, granted, we didn't see a difference in the liquid other than the whole glass just ghosted over.
Sure.
But tasting both of them, they tasted awful. I mean, they were probably some of the worst things they were not good. Waited 35, 45 minutes, room temp again. Tasted good again, but I mean, they were not good.
We got scientific on it. There was a video.
Interesting.
Really?
It was an OWA and a Russell's.
Yeah.
Both. NCF. And honestly, freezer, so not good. We were both just like, why does this taste awful? We've had both these bottles before. We've drank them. We know what it should taste like. And it was just...
somebody in processing can tell you exactly.
I mean, what that is.
You'd want to spit it out.
Mike and Chris at Artistory can tell you exactly what happened.
We're going to have to come up and spend it, because one of the things that you didn't talk about that I'm always game to go get is an Elijah Craig grenade.
Oh, yeah.
Those are some of my favorite.
They're 125 proof. I think they're 12 years old, aren't they?
Yeah, $30.
Yeah, it's a hell of a deal.
Yeah.
So are they?
It'll get you where you want to go.
Are they from a special area? Or are they more
fourth floor and higher?
I guess
usually
confined or more consistent. Because we've talked to people and laugh about it and tell folks those grenades have a very good but also unique flavor.
Well, they might be from another floor. They could be. I got to talk to Chris.
They're
and Mike
very
about
different
that.
from the barrel proofs. Any of the releases,
You want it to be because,
but it's
different.
unique and also
Could be from another
consistent.
floor.
So we always wonder if there's something just like, oh no, that corner of this, et cetera. That's just where we keep these because that's where we're going to sell them out.
Well, they could be from the corner, but we got 56 corners.
I mean, we have a
We
great
got 56
show.
different warehouses, so we have the luxury of having.
We just wonder if there's like the unique area of that's where we put the grenade barrels.
We have a great show we did. It's one of my favorites where we took the old squat barrel proof Elijah Craig versus two of the ones from last year versus the grenade, and we did them all in a blind, and it was just, and it's one of those shows that you really find out a lot about your palate and about what you think essentially would be the same whiskey. But that grenade, I think that grenade came in first or second for me.
Nice.
I love that little Elijah Craig grenade.
It's a cool little thing. They call them grenades because they're barrels.
Yeah.
But they because they're so small, it's only a 375, I think.
And if you look
So it
closely,
looks like a hand
you can
grenade.
see all the staves that are on the side. But if you're looking at it from far away, it just looks like.
And it's a good
grenade.
price. I mean, shit, they're great gifts.
But Zeke, we're sitting here, we're drinking this Elijah Craig 18 against Bernie's advice.
No, I just said you're. I said it's going to taste fine, but your eyes are going to tell you something.
It's
else.
hazy.
Right.
It's cloudy.
So
It's fun.
I don't think you meant to go there, but I'll take the lead and run with it, and I'll simply say,
I did. I meant to go there.
at least to me, it has a completely different back end taste, finish, etc. That, as it was described to me from other folks, they call, or some will call, sweet oak, and that's associated with part of the pre-fire quote unquote profile. I would say that hits it to a T.
Sure.
It's not as dry. It's not as pronounced of a just pungent oak flavor, which I guess would lead the door open to easily say, is it the wood that's different now, or did something change after the fire? But I'll let you roll with what did or didn't change during the fire, because that's definitely a source of contention between a lot of people, I feel like.
I mean, people get this romantic thing about distilleries and old distilleries and whatever. I mean, it's great. I mean, Parker will tell you that old distillery made really good whiskey, and he liked it, But he built that. His grandfather built that distillery, and so I look at it today as that the awards we're winning on a lot of these things are from the new distillery, our new distillery.
Do you have a preference, if you don't mind me?
Haven't tasted enough the pre-fire thing is
Sure.
I haven't, and it's all older stuff. How are you going to know? How are you going to taste? How are you going to go back into a time machine and taste 5-year-old whiskey from DSB? We did taste it, by the way. We just had some J.W. Dant.
Oh yeah.
I kind of prefer the Evan Williams Bottle and Bond to that 4-year-old J.W. Dant. So it depends a lot on age. When I look at the distiller's rule of thumb, when a distiller, Greg Davis taught me this, master distiller at Maker's Mark, and he says, he was a brewer. He lived down here in Nashville for a while. So he says, when you look at a distiller's rule of thumb, it's a sliding scale. So you look at it. 10% of the final flavor comes from yeast strain. So if you keep everything else the same and only change the yeast strain, that whiskey at the end, for a rule of thumb, is going to taste about 10% different. Then you've got distillation. So this, whether it's pot still, column still, distillation is 15%. So if I keep the yeast strain the same and I keep everything else the same, and same age, same floor, same whatever, 15% different. Then you got your fermentation, your small grains, that's 25%. So if I change up the recipe, if I have a high rye recipe compared to a regular bourbon rye, if I have a wheat bourbon wheat recipe compared to that, 25% difference. Then aging's 50. It's a sliding scale. So that 18 is probably a 60% for aging. Okay. Mm-hmm. So think about that, and think about the genius of what Jimmy Rutledge did over at Four Roses. They have nothing but single-story warehouses. Aging's not 50% there. Aging's going to go way down. So what did he do? He said, I'm using yeast strain and recipe to change. And then he makes 10 different whiskeys and does that. So that's a big deal.
Smart.
Right? He doesn't have 7 floors, 9 floors like everybody else has. And, they said, well, just tear them down, build them. They cost $5.5 million a piece. So, you have to do it. And I think that's just genius what they did over there. Then you look at what Parker is doing. So Parker's like bringing out 12-year-old whiskey and 18-year-old whiskey on purpose, right? So it took him decades to figure out, first floor for anything 18 or older, or fit whatever. There's a cutoff, if in their mind. Anything less can come from everywhere. And then you've got lower floors for older. You got 4th floor and higher for rye whiskeys and premium whiskeys. So that takes time because you do this. So when you look at that pre-fire, like different ages come from different parts of the floor. It could have been before they really learned. You could have gotten a good one. Single barrel. Each barrel tastes a little different. Oh yeah. Right. So that pre-fire to me, I don't look at it as such a big deal. And that's disappointing to many people. And I've been talking to them and they just get disappointed. And I'm like, I said, I don't have the affection. And I wasn't here when that distillery was built. Parker had an affection for that. Craig has an affection for that. It's something that Charlie Downs has an affection for that. They tried to put the fire out as the fire was coming up into the distillery. I get it. But it's still a Vendôme still. It's still the same still. That whiskey doesn't know what building it's in. It knows what vessel it's in. It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a thought, right? And people say also too, corn was different. People never think about that. Parker told me that. Bernie, the corn was different. What do you mean? He said, there are different strains of corn right now. There was different strains of corn back then.
Those damn GMOs.
Well, that's another hot button issue.
That's an alternative fact.
And that's
joke, kind of.
Do you you really don't want non-GMO stuff, and there's not enough of it in the world to make the whiskey we make, so it's okay. We're okay with GMO, but the corn was different. So that's 25% of the flavor. So when when I look at that what Greg taught me of the rule of thumb really comes in handy when I talk to people like that. And I just so matter-of-factly, that could be that. It was pre-fire. That's fine. If you want to have an affinity. But guess what? There's going to be a day, and the day's really quick, that all that whiskey's gone. Gone. So what are you doing now? Are you going to drink nothing?
Hold on to a few barrels under the house or bottles. Yeah.
It's gonna be gone. It's gonna be gone. So let's appreciate what we're making now and winning awards on, because guess what? You can't go back in a time machine and get that all the time.
No, I certainly get it and appreciate it.
Yeah, and I appreciate what it was and that, but hell, I like what we're doing.
One other thing another friend brought up to me as I was talking about this coming up was after the fire, there was more than likely some sourcing to meet supply issues.
Absolutely.
So with that, you would have such a drastic difference that by the time stocks were built back up to be non-sourced Heaven Hill and juice again, that'd be such a window of change that you would go from one standard to someone else's standard to almost a new standard, what do you want to call it? But
absolutely,
as all those other factors changed, it would just seem so much different to everyone. Those 3 different windows, it does almost kind of separate in the middle lag being the sourcing that is,
and that's where the folks like Mike and Chris and all their team get together and they do the blind triangle tests, because when they were blending and mingling, we don't like the word blend, mingling, sourced or again. So Brown-Forman, next door to us, and there we were contracting, not sourcing, but contracting. We did source some barrels because nobody else. We were the only ones making old whiskey really on purpose. So but if they had older whiskey, they would help. Right. And they also wanted to make money too, right? Yeah. So it's a lot cheaper to sell it to Max.
It's not a charity, right?
But a lot cheaper to sell it to Max and ship it to Japan, right? So it was helpful. As Mike Beach says, I don't think that if Pepsi-Cola had a fire, Coca-Cola would call up and offer help, right? And people did. So that's a great thing. But also, Parker and Jimmy and are friends, and Lincoln Henderson, are friends, and Booker No are friends. So how can we help? So we got some barrels we can sell you to fill some holes. Well, if you're doing a 1,000 barrel dump or a 600 barrel dump, and there's 50 barrels from them, but it's a similar recipe, I go back to it's Vendome stills. The recipe is about the same. We were sending our yeast strain over. By the way, we have the same yeast strain as the Beam. So anything coming from the Beam is the Beam family yeast strain. So you see how all that comes into play to where it's not that different, really. And if you're only putting 50 barrels into a 600 barrel dump and you got 550 barrels of yours, only 50 of that here and there, it's not the dramatic difference that you're thinking it is in your head.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So this is what the challenge is, and that's what people like Mike and Chris and different people, they love that. I mean, it's kind of a pain that it happens. No one wanted the fire to happen, but they get to put their skills into action, right? They get to do the stuff. We're supposed to make it taste the same. By the way, Evan Williams was 7 years old, 90 proof back then. It's now 5 years old, 86 proof. We had to adjust. We didn't have as many barrels. We were giving away a lot of age and a lot of proof. So, things we were playing up against for 4 years old, 80 proof. Well, shoot, 7 years old, 90 proof, that's not even a fair fight, right? So you got to, again, the whiskey business, whiskey charity thing,
Yep.
A lot of things going on.
That's all I was thinking of when you were saying that, when you bought when you all bought the bourbon from other people or contracted with other people. It's
And both.
It's a little bit of both at that time. It was a
Yes.
whiskey charity and a whiskey business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we all, shoot, Charlie's wife works at Wild Turkey. In the accounting department, in the HR department, but still, everybody has, it is Kentucky. Right?
Yeah.
Bourbon's a big industry.
Yeah.
So you can have people in families who work at different distilleries. So they're going to help each other.
But, I think when I have this Elijah Craig 18, to me, I'm still getting some, and this is where Zeke and I differ, and we've never really sat down and had a big conversation on it, but I still get on this pre-fire, it's almost like a little bit of a cigar aftertaste in the finish for me, where it's the oak is just kind of that. I'm not getting the sweet oak. I get sweet on the very front, but the finish to me is the same. That it's that dry, cigar-y.
Really? You think that finished the same as that one we had?
I'm getting this maple sweetness, and I'm influenced because you said it, and I tasted. I was like,
No, but see, that's the problem. You got to stop listening
I
to
know.
Zeke.
Yeah, Mr. Broken Palate.
No,
over there.
blind tastings here. Blind tastings.
You've now listened to him. It's like right before. That's why I hate when people look at the tasting notes before they come taste something, because someone will say like, "Oh, this has like baking spices and orange and citrus and all that," and all of a sudden they're like, "I taste citrus," and it's like, well, you read somebody else that said you got citrus. What did you get?
That's the funny thing. It's like you said it, and then it's like you said it as I was drinking, and then my mind's like, "Ooh, sweet maple wood. This is delicious."
Don't worry, it's there.
It's there.
I will simply say, granted, the bottle is very low, but my Elijah Craig 18 was also somewhat low, and I handed it off and never looked back. Even if mine was at that state and cloudy, I would keep that one.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
It's tasty. It's very.
And they're single barrel. Remember, they're single barrels.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's another fact of it. This past year's Parker's Heritage, John's got one. A couple other local friends of ours have
11
them.
year.
Awesome.
he doesn't like mine, but he likes everybody else.
No, I had 3 different ones and did not like any of them. Just thought they were a bit of a hot mess. Mm-hmm. A guy sends me a sample of one randomly. I get it, and literally I'm just like, I'm going to hand up this thing, but I may as well go ahead and get it off my shelf so it's not taking up space. I take a sip. I'm like, oh, shit. This is really good. I'm blowing up John, like other friends. I'm like, you guys got to taste this. I'm like, this is the winner here. Like, we got to find some of this barrel.
I appreciate the guy because he sent more than 2 ounces in the sample, so we each had a nice.
It was a 4 ounce somewhere. Jar.
Nice.
It was hard to even drink out of, but man, it was great.
But speaking of which, I think it's about time we take a break from this. And Bernie, we thank you for all of this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure.
We want people to
hopefully
go.
we address. I mean, we love meeting hot button issues head on. We like to feel at Heaven Hill we're very transparent in everything we do. I'll put a little plug in for my company, heavenhilldistillery.com. We tell the dimensions of our stills, how many thousands of barrels are in each rick house. We tell every one of our recipes. It's all there. Email us if you want to talk about water, if you want to talk about GMO, if you want to talk about chill filtration. We love to talk about it. You might not like the answer we give you because we're very honest, but that's okay. You know, we want you to know we are a family owned company. And so thank you for letting me talk about some of these issues. I mean, you know, you want to talk about the pre-fire and I probably deflated, you know, I was texting you the other night going, hey, you know, whatever. But we addressed them today. Hopefully
I liked where we went. I know only a certain sect
the rule of thumb is cool to think about.
Well, only a certain sect of people listening are going to, you know, that's going to be their jam. So I didn't want to beat it too much.
No, it's fine.
But while we're on the note of, you know, any questions open, we do have some friends that run and/or own stores, and they want to know when either and or both Henry McKenna picks and or Elijah Craig barrel proof picks will be coming out.
Never.
Fair.
Yeah.
I was told I had to ask or I would be cut off.
Well, you know, we used to sell 18-year-old barrels. You know, back when there was plenty of whiskey, there was. But, you know, we had to take the age statement off the Elijah Craig. And then we got a lot of heat for taking it off. You know, many other distilleries bigger than us can't keep up with age statements. But what was happening was when we took the age statement off, and it's still 8 to 12 years old. So it's 8. So this isn't totally correct, but think about it this way. We now we used to do 70 barrel dumps at the beginning for small batch. Now they're 300 because people are thirsty, right? So you got a bourbon business, right? It's labor intensive to do small batches. So 300 barrels. So picture 150 of those barrels being 8, 9, and 10 years old, and the other 150 being 11 and 12. There's still some really old whiskey. If you put Elijah Craig small batch up against Henry McKenna, the Elijah Craig's much darker. And Elijah Craig's 94 proof, and Henry McKenna's 100. So there's a lot more older whiskey and still old whiskey in that. So when we had to take the age statement off, we were challenged with, we could keep it on there for sure, but we know where that goes, like W.L. Weller 12. So you don't see that on the shelf anymore.
Well, honestly,
You do in Texas.
I think you helped yourself by not saying the barrels had to be 12 years old, especially from a store pick perspective.
But
I'm sure there's plenty of singles.
I'm getting to the store pick perspective here. So we had to do away with every barrel program because Henry McKenna and Elijah Craig barrel proof are the same recipe. They're just different ages, different proofs. So if all of a sudden, like Henry McKenna just won Best Bourbon of the World in the San Francisco Spirits Competition, nobody cares about awards till you win them, right? But we did. But Elijah Craig Small Batch came in second. Really? Wow. Yes. Second. Okay. And that's small batch. That's the small batch. The 8 to 12. That's not the all 12 years old. That's not the last year, which won from Whiskey Magazine, Whiskey of the World, the barrel proof. That's the small batch. So all of a sudden, everyone wants to buy a Henry McKenna barrel. Well, that's all 10 years old. If we sold 1,000 Henry McKenna barrels, all of a sudden we're out of 10-year-old barrels, which goes into the dump of the small batch. So this is the exercise in futility that you go through when you own a bourbon distillery. And if you sell every 12 year, the barrel proof goes away because all of them is sold as 10-year-old and it doesn't get to 12-year-old. Not to mention there's no 18 and 23 now. So now you gotta go to Max, our owner and president, and go, this is where I screwed up. I opened up the Henry McKenna, and now we got barrels we're selling here, and I got no more 18 to go. Well, and you're going to have to listen to him lay into you because there's no 18 or 23.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was saying, inversely, we could go to the wave of people hated age statements, then they wanted them. I don't necessarily care about an age statement. I care about the profile.
I'm just telling you.
I know.
But Henry McKenna's got to be 10 years old, so that's where they go. So anyway, that's where that went.
So we could talk about this stuff
this
for
is
another 2 hours. So, Bertie, we thank you. We
Sure.
want people to go find Heaven Hill at heavenhilldistillery.com. Go to Twitter at heavenhill1935.
Absolutely.
Go to Instagram at Heaven Hill Distillery. Go see our friend Bernie Lubbers.
And I'm at
on
Bernie Lubbers
Instagram.
at about everything, and I have a website too called whiskeyprof.com, like whiskey professor.
And go visit our friend Ryan Yamada at now in Nashville. Does headquarters have anything?
HQBeerCave.com. Yeah.
HQBeerCave.com. Go see headquarters. They got some good arcade games down there in Nashville. We are going to take a quick break and actually drink some stuff. We'll come back. We'll talk about those. So if you want to listen to the second episode, we're going to release these both in the same night. So I'm going to be pretty busy editing all this audio. Stay tuned. Cheers.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thanks
guys.
much, guys.
Thanks for having me.